I'm going to talk about pain today.
This topic comes up a lot.
There's just a lot of people in pain.
There are a lot of people in pain.
And there's even more people that don't know they're in pain.
Agreed. Agreed. And it comes out in really crazy and bizarre ways that you wouldn't expect, like road rage.
Well,
uh,
there's that. We got.
like overly emotional and, arguments.
I think it. There, you got to step it back from there. Read that. Read that thing you
Okay.
got there.
So,
For
emotional signs that your body is in pain can include feeling anxious, frustrated, depressed, angry, irritable, overwhelmed, withdrawn, experience a sense of hopelessness,
helplessness. That's
helplessness.
what it says.
I make shit up.
It's
It's
AI.
okay. Difficulty concentrating.
You're in pain.
I must be.
Increased
They
mood
didn't say anything
swings.
about vision problems yet.
I got it from
Okay,
here.
okay.
Increased mood swings, feeling like a burden to others, and having trouble sleeping.
See, he's a good husband. He steps in when I
Okay,
fail,
great.
when I need help.
So I think that it points to, and I think it's not even pain. And I think that's where there's a disconnect with the
Mm,
understanding about pain, is because it's a nervous system being in a heightened state.
exactly, exactly.
So what ends up happening is people get accidents, injuries, surgeries, traumas
Yes,
over
writing notes.
over their throughout their life. Stress of being growing up, being children, being adults, being spouses,
Yeah,
having aging parents, stresses of meeting financial bills and all that kind of stuff, and it builds up in the neurology to a point where we start getting these abnormal experiences in our body, which is kind of normalized, which
mm-hmm.
is the feeling anxious, frustrated, depressed, angry, irritable, overwhelmed, withdrawn, sense of helplessness, difficulty concentrating, increased mood swing. Like all of that happens as a result of this heightened state in the nervous system. And eventually it gets to a point where they can't handle it anymore. The body can't handle it anymore. And then it shows up in pain. But if you ask somebody about this, they're like, I'm not in pain.
Yeah. And, in addition to that, I want to add that when the nervous system starts getting into a heightened state, and that could be from like the juggling of multiple tasks, the overwhelm and the anxiety, the worry about money and all the things that you listed, you start losing bandwidth to handle anything else, and the body gets overstimulated. And so the nervous
Mm-hmm.
system gets into a heightened state. And so, like, I just wanted to add that angle in there too. I start thinking about magnesium. Like I'm already jumping the gun with some other things I'll write down, but
Well, I think the
yeah.
the whole point of where we're at right now is not necessarily providing a solution. It is the recognition that there is a problem, because a lot of people don't
Mm,
understand. It's like they try to suppress it. It's like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. I got a high pain tolerance.
yeah.
Not a big deal. It's been worse, and it starts ramping up over time, and it finally gets to a breaking point, like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then all of a sudden, they don't have the capacity to handle it anymore, to hold their shit
I
together.
mean, that happened to me. That totally happened to me, with having 5 children, homeschooling, which was such a freaking stress for me, running 3 businesses, trying to practice homeopathy. And like, there was just so much going on, like, not even just my physical levels of pain on a daily basis, but like the noise and the frustration and the failing relationship with my ex-husband, like all these things added up. And it's like I actually had a breakdown, like a adrenal breakdown. And I had no idea like how much pain I was in until like that thing hit, and it was just like insane. Like, so yes, that was one of those times for me personally where it was just like I felt like I was hit. That was one of my rock bottom times.
And
but I wouldn't have told you I was in pain.
Exactly.
That's the point I wanted to make.
That's the
I
point.
wouldn't have said I was in pain, but it was excruciating.
there is, in that space, the brain is doing this interesting kind of dance of giving the illusion that we have the capacity to hold things together.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
I can do one more thing, sure.
The ship is burning.
Yeah, freaking sinking.
So when a person can get to that place to go, there's got to be a recognition of some things need to be let go of. What is the essentials to do?
Yeah.
What's really important? What are just like nice to do? And I think there's a challenge in discernment of understanding which is which in all of that, especially if your mom and your wife or your husband and you're trying to make sure all the bills are paid. You have all of these pressures that we take on in our life, not recognizing the commitment that we're making when we add on another thing.
Yeah, and then you throw in being a perfectionist on top of it and having very strong opinions and ideas about like how things are supposed to look around you and how kids are supposed to act, or how, the house is supposed to be, how you're supposed to present your life to others. And holding that together on a baseline is freaking hard. Okay. Like
even by yourself,
even
you see single people,
right,
that are having difficulty holding like the keeping up with the Joneses
right,
kind of image.
Right. And so then when you're trying to do these things, which are really all arbitrary, they don't mean anything. They have to do with our desire to look a certain way and to be presented. It really comes down to our pride and our vanity. Okay. Like when those things are running real strong in the front ground, they take up so much bandwidth. And then you get these other things like are going on. You don't see all this other stuff going on that's causing all this other pain and all this turmoil. And it just, man, it feeds the fire like nobody's business. Because guess what? I'm too busy. I'm too this, I'm too that to be in pain. It can't be pain because that's just going to ruin my plan. Right? If I have to go get medication, like I can't do that. Like I can't go and I can't ask for help because that's weak. That's weak.
I think that,
that's where I was.
I think the place that we're talking about is in that gap, is in where we're trying to hold things together and before people go get the medication.
Yeah.
Like that's the intersection of what we'll talk about on a regular basis, because that's where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's where we can begin to take steps to empower ourselves with knowledge and understanding, learning ourselves. Know thyself.
Pons and Isabia, right? Did I say that right?
Maybe. It's Russian.
It's Russian.
But in that place, there's little things you could begin doing that will empower you so it never gets to a breaking point, and that you can teach your nervous system or your neurology to have more capacity to handle those things. Learning to let go of different things that aren't necessary. Finding more of the discernment.
Yes. And I would add to that, some of it you need a little more stimulation from a little tiny little signal that helps you to let go of some of this stuff so that you can learn these things a little easier. And I don't know how to segue into like that, the mysteriousness of the homeopathy and how that plays into everything. And like I said, you said before, we're not doing solutions, in this podcast, but oh man, this is really good stuff to talk about later because it's so nebulous and unknown that there's all these other possibilities. And that's why we're called possibilities in health or healing.
Pete's doing a cameo.
Hi, Pete.
So there's this, I think we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And usually we can't recognize those things when we're going 1,000 miles an hour and we're trying to ignore things. It's in the quiet spaces or the ability to calm our nervous system down or learn how to calm the nervous system down to identify what is causing irritation, what is actually benefiting us and what is actually causing more problems. And I think as we begin to become aware of things and dropping the neurology, the nervous system, to that lower parasympathetic state, then we can get a better understanding of what to do about things.
Yeah. And I think that's a great topic all on its own, dropping the neurology, because there's so much nuance in that, from where you are right now, it might just be taking an extra breath before you speak.
Sometimes.
There's so much nuance in that conversation. Are you going to get comfortable? Anyway.
Yeah, there's different, it's not a one size fits all. Like, if I just breathe before I say something, I can breathe and I can still snap. So I think there's a lot of different things that can be put into place to help the whole calming of the neurology in a way that allows for things to change. And when I say change, permanently change for the better. There, as I look over the landscape of my life and where I was, let's say 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I can't point to one specific thing that I started doing that I carried it through for that amount of time that made the difference. There's multiple things. A lot of times it isn't one thing that will do it. You can identify high leverage points in there. However, it's got to be a pursuit that you want things to change for the better. You want things to improve in your life. You're not happy where you're at. I think it's kind of like being an alcoholic. You have to. You got to admit.
I can't wait to hear this one.
Well, no, how? I mean, it's like.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to hear how you're going to tie it in.
The first step in recovering from alcoholism is admitting you have a problem.
Yes.
And a lot of people are going through holding their shit together. They don't even admit they have a problem.
Got it.
That's the piece. It's like there's lots of people. We're in conversations with people yesterday.
I'm so glad it was that simple.
What? What's that simple?
You're tying in the alcohol, being an alcoholic.
Yeah. Who's an alcoholic?
No, it's not about who's an alcoholic. It's just sometimes, in case you don't know this about Bill, he can have very random thoughts.
They're not random. They tie together.
Well, see, they tie together for him, but sometimes he needs to explain them a little bit.
I'm just ahead of the curve.
Right?
Most people that are struggling with things, like I was talking with somebody yesterday, and they've been in martial arts for decades, and they study forms, different forms, and
yes,
they were having something with, they help paint, and they're talking about their shoulder, and they can only raise their shoulder so high.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about proper position of the scapula in the shoulder will free the space for the arm to raise. It's a simple concept.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I was talking about relaxing the tension in the neurology, changing the wiring in the nervous system to free that up, like you can't drive the car faster without taking the foot off the brake. All these analogies, all these concepts, and they were doubling down on, it's like, well, the shoulder's not that bad. Well, it's like it's been getting progressively worse, and this is where there's that gap that I can't help a person that isn't admitting that what they're doing isn't working.
And neurologically, when they're already that overstimulated and overwhelmed, you're telling them something that they can't even absorb.
But that's a point of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's in the gap. That's between they're doing all this stuff, whether it's working or not, or working marginally. And
so that's when they need to slow down and recognize that they need to make a slowdown before they yay or nay any new information.
Yeah, if something isn't working,
yeah,
there has to be the recognition that what they're doing isn't working. That's the piece. And what I've found in working with people, and it's been decades now that I've been working with people in pain, a lot of them, they don't even want to admit they're in that place of pain, or something that they're doing isn't working. It's not necessarily, you could label it pain, you could label it anxious and frustrated and depressed or angry or irritable or overwhelmed. All of those labels that you put on there. The shoulder isn't moving, my knees hurt, I got a bunion on my big toe, I got lower back pain, sciatica.
I wake up to pee 5 times at night.
Yeah, whatever that is. And they're like, oh, that's just normal.
Right.
And they'll let that normal go to a point where now there's a crisis, and they're running to the conventional medical model, who has 3 things that they can do. Mm-hmm. They can cut you, do surgery, they can drug you, give you a prescription or a shot, or they can fry you, which is chemotherapy. That's really the extent of the conventional medical model. And
no. They can invalidate you and tell you it's all in your head. Of course, that's a different kind of drug.
That's another. And just for the listeners out there, I don't have an issue with the conventional medical model if I've been in a traumatic accident or something. And
there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
However, in day-to-day maintenance of the physical body, things that build up over time, I don't think the conventional medical model is equipped or even understands the body on a deep enough level to provide any sort of help, because the other person in that conversation yesterday was a medical doctor. And he was trying to wrap his brain around from his medical training as to what's going on, why he can't get up and down from the ground.
Right.
Or being able to reach his foot to tie his shoe.
The guy with the shoulder pain.
No, this is the other guy.
The other guy couldn't wrap his brain around why the doctor couldn't wrap his brain around why the doctor couldn't do certain things.
Why he couldn't reach his feet. It was getting more and more difficult to reach his feet.
Yeah, so their medical training is so deficient in the understanding of where you're coming from.
Right.
That unless they've come to the point where they start questioning it, at some point, like, it can be difficult to bridge that gap. Here. Oh, thank you. Excuse the noise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't scratch your neck anymore.
Apparently not.
Okay. What were you saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that there's deficiencies in the medical training that doctors are getting, that what you're saying is just like speaking another language. Like I saw this doctor, I came up for like 20, 30 seconds of the conversation, and he looked genuinely like perplexed. Like he was really trying to wrap his brain around it, but he just couldn't.
Mm-hmm. It's just a different reality.
And
it's like talking electrical work to a plumber or accounting to an electrician. It's like a different way of looking at the world. And I don't think we're quite there yet as understanding that there's a recognition that there's two different.
Well, yeah. And sometimes, it's not the talking and the logic that will get through. It's the actual like experience that gets through. It's like, that's when I stop. Like when I see people get so in their head like that, like if from a homeopathic perspective, if I've got a remedy handy or something, like I will just give it to them at that point if they'll take it, and say, okay, just see what happens.
Well,
and like I'm like, how do you do that from a bodywork perspective? Like, here, let me hold your shoulder for a second. Let me work on your shoulder. Like, how do you bridge that gap of giving them the experience with something that's kind of intangible, like bodywork and homeopathy, which is our background,
I think the body work is more difficult, especially when we're creating comfort. It's more difficult to prove because it's quiet.
Really? Than given a subtle little electromagnetic signal that like works so gently that people don't even, it's like a steady drop that hollows the stone.
Well, here's an example. Using the contrast between body work and martial arts, sometimes people get all in their head about how to take a strike.
Yeah.
And they'll get real philosophizing about, here, well, what do you do? When do you breathe out? When do you breathe in? Yes. Well, how do you tense up? Where do you let loose? How, all of those, yes. All of those pieces. And a lot of times you can explain. The only solution is just to hit them.
Right.
That brings the reality of what is being talked about to the forefront. It's something that they can relate with. And with body work, a lot of times, especially when it's quiet. What?
Just getting him on the camera. Because it's so funny.
He's such a dork. So, are you going to drink more?
I'm going to.
Well, then why don't you drink more? You want to sit there? What are we talking about? Oh yeah, punching people. No, with body work, when it's quiet, when people don't understand, people will describe things and relate to things based on their previous experiences. So
yes, because it's like their framework.
It's their framework for life, for their
for
reality.
Recognizing the world.
And if you try to describe something that exists outside of it, they'll disregard it. Their nervous system will do kind of this, turning the snow globe over and confuse everything. So it pulls them back into what they know and they're familiar with.
Especially when they're in a lot of pain.
Yeah, well, there's that. That's why you disregard the ideas that come into my head, because I'm just trying to describe something that's outside of your understanding.
You think you're clever, don't you?
Yes, I do. Anyways, when you create comfort and it changes the neurology, there's a part that the body wants to go back and see if it hurts. If it's a shoulder, or if it's a lower back, or if it's a knee. Instead of allowing the comfort that's been created to begin the domino effect throughout the nervous system to reorganize around the comfort that was just created.
Mm-hmm. I've definitely seen people do that. For me, like, it's always like, oh my God, it's actually comfortable, and now I can't do anything to mess up that comfort. Because there's that fear that the pain's going to come back. And so then you kind of go into like the freeze state. And then there's the worry, like, if I do this and it comes back, I've failed or I've fucked up.
Yeah.
Nice. There's, thanks.
Potty mouth.
Monkey on the ground.
I should play that. No, keep talking.
So yeah, there's different reactions, and this is different constitution types. Like this is a whole other conversation
But
that we're not going to get into today. But
I would,
it's still very, very
I would
interesting.
suggest that the thing that I've heard in terms of people with homeopathy, when people aren't familiar with homeopathy, the first thing they say, "Oh, you mean like herbs?"
Oh yes,
because they're trying to understand it from the reference point that they understand the world, and it's like herb adjacent.
Yeah,
it's not it. And in a way, it's not even close.
It's not even close.
So they're trying to create an understanding of what homeopathy is from what it's not. Systema. Oh, you mean like Russian martial art? What, you mean like Russian karate? Russian kung fu? It's like they're talking about from a reference point that they can relate to.
Yes.
Oh, so it's you do like forms, like standing up,
yeah,
things like that, and it's movement, breathing, relaxation, right. And people, it's difficult
like
to
yoga,
like yoga,
somatic experience,
somatic experiencing.
So speaking of having things that you can relate to that are within a wheelhouse. So wait, turn it off.
What?
Let me set it up. Gosh,
go.
He's so impatient.
Yeah, sometimes.
I think it's important as couples that you have these little things that you can relate to, like inside jokes and things that kind of bring context and ease and lightness to your relationship. Like when Bill pisses me off, I may say monkey on the car. And here you're going to find out what exactly that means. Go for it.
Monkey on the car. Monkey on the car. Fuck off.
The link will be in the show notes. So you could incorporate it into your relationship too. Okay. What else are we going to talk about? We talk about pain?
Yeah, we talked about pain. I've got some ideas for follow-up podcasts that we can kind of expand on some of the things that we talked about, because there's so many rabbit holes that we could go down right now. And I wanted to keep it real simple, on our misunderstanding of what pain is in this one.
So if there are people,
Go ahead. I do have one more thing I want to say about.
You want to interrupt me?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. If there's anybody that has questions or input or comments, please.
Yeah, drop those in the comments below.
Comments wherever you're seeing this.
So not understanding their bodies in pain. This was a really difficult one for me because, like I said earlier, there's a thing in my life where I have worked really hard to overcome this, where I was worried about what other people were, how they were perceiving me. Wherever this came from, like, having a mom that wanted you to look perfect and, and then feeling like, well, all these eyes are on you. And like, if it was easier to be perfect than to have conflict. Okay. Like there's so much around this, like psychologically, that we could go into. But that would lead me to, like, I know, like he doesn't give a rat's butt about what he looks like. He just finds comfort, I mean, everybody needs to be like Pete.
Be like, that's it.
Be like Pete. Be like Pete. I love it. I got to write it down. Be like Pete. Be like Pete. We've got great pictures that we can put on there.
Yeah.
This is one of them. But like I would sit, he's fine. I would sit in these really uncomfortable positions. I wouldn't realize how much pain I was in, but I could look back and see, like, okay, the first signs would be like I wouldn't be breathing. I'd be kind of holding my breath. The second one is that I'm starting to get really dry mouth because, like, my body, with the pain ramping up, I'm getting into like fight or flight. Okay. Number two, a really big one that like took me a really long time to figure out was that I would start, because I was holding tension in my pelvis and in the lower abdomen, I'd start to get trapped gas. And so I'd get this incredibly painful gas like buildup that sometimes, Bill, would last for 2 or 3 days before it would relent. It was awful.
Good to know.
It was really awful. And then like stiffness and tension and other things, even to the point where like I would start trembling and couldn't speak right. So there was all these cues. If I had slowed down or if I had been looking at that, but I was missing them, I was in a ridiculous amount of pain.
Yep.
Yeah. So that
you got a client in a couple minutes, but
okay.
It's probably a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So, anyways, good job.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah.
Join us again next time.
We'll chat again soon. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next time.